Talking politics, and in particular, what does the business community make of the coalition government, its policies, and what, if anything, would they like more of? What would they like to change? What are they lobbying for behind the scenes? Well, this all came out in the open, as it were, with last week's mood of the Boardroom report. And somebody who's done a little bit of an analysis of this and written a fascinating article, Bryce Edwards from the Democracy Project. Bryce, kia ora, good morning.
Morena, Andrew.
This is interesting, although a little bit predictable, I suppose. There's not a lot of surprises. One of the big surprises for some people might be that the business community is generally happy with the coalition government and likes the policies that they're enacting.
Yeah, look, this report comes out every year. The Herald go and interview and survey about 100 of the top CEOs from business and get to hear what they're whining about and what they're happy about.
Yeah.
And yes, they are actually quite content with this government, which isn't a total surprise. Business does tend to prefer centre-right or right-wing governments, and they give the tick of approval to a lot of what the government's doing, especially in the space of economic reforms and around infrastructure, education, crime. So when asked, what are the most important policy changes that the current government's making, businesses tend to give the biggest marks to infrastructure, especially the new infrastructure agency that the government's developing and the 30-year plan, the fast track bill, and also dealing with things like crime, improving the education system. Those are the ones that get the top marks. And in fact, when you look at the politicians that get the top marks, the one at the very top is the Minister of Education, Erica Stanford.
Wow.
So she's rated just over 4 out of 5 by the business community. And I mean, I'm not shocked by that, but It is quite interesting that it's not the Prime Minister, it's not the Minister of Finance or Infrastructure.
It's not the leaders of any of the coalition partners.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I think this will turn out to be a bit of a turning point for Erica Stanford's career. I mean, I've been watching her closely, and I think other, political nerds have been kind of seeing her as the future, perhaps, of the National Party, maybe a future Prime Minister. And certainly this result does confirm that that's what the business community think. And it's quite interesting because when you look at how the business community rate the Labour front bench and MPs, they give the Labour education spokesperson, Jen Tinetti, their lowest score.
Wow.
So I think you're seeing a clear message here that the last government didn't really deliver in the education, in terms of schools, but that they like what the new government's doing.
It is interesting, though, that if we go back a year, that the business community wasn't totally unhappy with the Labour government when they were the Labour government, but they're very unhappy with them now that they're in opposition.
Yeah, so as I said, the business community are more biased to the right. So they're always going to give National Act a bit more of an easy ride. But, in the past, when Jacinda Ardern was Prime Minister, they were actually very happy with her. Mm-hmm. And with Grant Robertson, Minister of Finance, they gave them quite high marks in previous moods of the Boardroom reports. But now they're giving what's left of the Labour front bench pretty low marks. So Chris Hipkins, I think he gets a rating of 2.3 out of 5. And he's surpassed, according to the CEOs, by, I have to remember who. I've got my notes here. Kieran McNulty gets the highest score for Labour. Barbara Edmonds, Aisha Verrill. So they're the ones that are being rated, whereas at the bottom of the list are Willie Jackson, Willow Jen Prime, and Jen Tinetti.
Mm-hmm. I mean, interesting stuff indeed. One thing I don't know if I'm surprised or not, but for business leaders, their maths is pretty poor, Bryce, because they're wanting the government to spend a lot more money in all of these key areas, but they're also wanting to pay a lot less tax. I mean, some would say typical business people, they're just looking for more profits. They don't care about the people. But, I mean, honestly, it just doesn't add up, does it? If there's more tax breaks and the government is spending more, a business leader should know that if you're not breaking even, the board's going to want to have a word.
Look, I think you're generally right on that. So the business community are asking for more money to be spent on defence. They're wanting tax cuts for businesses. So they think the company tax rate, which is currently 28%, should be reduced to 25%
Yep.
or even less to match Australia's company tax rate. But actually, a lot of them, almost half of them, are favourable to a capital gains tax.
Oh,
So I think some of them are kind of connecting with what you just said.
yeah.
They realise that we can't keep increasing taxation on employees or on consumption taxes like GST, and that there is a need to find somewhere else to bring in the revenue. And so obviously, yeah, there's a bit of discussion about a capital gains tax or a wealth tax, and business are starting to, warm to that idea of if you do make profits on selling property, assets, then yes, you should pay some tax on that.
Or at least a solid hard look at the tax system at the moment, and some significant economic changes, not just to the tax system, but more generally, a bit of a shake-up they're asking for?
Yes, they are. So, although this business community is quite happy with the current government, they're actually pretty unhappy with the state of the economy and with the lack of productivity in our economy, and the fact that governments don't seem to be able to get back to surplus at the moment. So they are wanting some radical reforms. They're not even quite sure what those radical reforms should be, but they even talk about sometimes. Those words, Rogernomics or Ruth Richardson, and which are kind of scary words for a lot of us New Zealanders, because it does mean a lot of shake-ups. And so we might yet see Nicola Willis, bringing in some bigger changes than we've currently kind of been led to believe this government will do.
Yeah, and now when it comes to what they're lobbying for, it's one thing to say smiley face or frown in terms of the current government policies, but what are they lobbying for? Any significant big changes that, because to be fair, yes, they tend to like right-wing governments, but in terms of spheres of influence and lobby groups, the business community pretty well connected to the current coalition government.
Yeah, well, as I've said, they generally want business taxes to go down.
Yep.
They want more deregulation, red tape cut, streamlined. They want a lot more money spent on infrastructure, and a lot of them are quite keen for the government to get the private sector to do that infrastructure, which again might not be that surprising. They think that the private sector should be given public-private partnerships.
Yep.
So these are kind of deals where you might have a private sector that builds and owns a hospital. Yeah. And then they essentially rent it out, I guess.
Dunedin Hospital, for example, to pick something. Was there anything in particular about health? Because I mean that's all over the news at the moment with budget blowouts for health and the cancelling of the Dunedin Hospital rebuild.
I think business are keeping right away from health. I don't know if anyone's got the answers to health at the moment, but it is interesting that a lot of the CEOs did actually talk about their worry about social dislocation, inequality, division in society, and they could see that the welfare state does need to exist and does need to be fixed up. And so a lot of them talked about, basically, if you're a business and you want to be profitable, you need some sort of, social stability. You don't really want riots going on. You don't really want people living in cars and crime and so forth affecting, your business model. So they want, New Zealand to get back to a bit more happiness where there's a bit more contentment.
So pushing against the stereotypes there, it's not all about, hey, let's cut my taxes so I can put up my profits and let's cut benefits so we can afford to pay for that. A little bit of a social conscience in the business community. Good to see.
Yeah, no, it is good, and they say they're worried about inequality. They say that some of the race relations issues they're worried about. But as I say, yeah, social conscience, but also businesses are smart, and they realize that you can't really um, carry on in a society making decent profits if things are at war
Yeah.
and people aren't trusting each other. But actually, one that does bring up one of the things that I did find quite interesting in the survey was that when it came to race relations reforms, the business community said that was a very low priority.
Oh,
So they weren't really very interested in what David Seymour or some of the more Crown-Murray relations reforms that are going on. They just weren't interested in that. That was just such a low priority. They just care about fixing up the economy.
okay. Different people, of course, different priorities within the nation
Yeah.
that makes up the diversity of who we are. But that is the mood of the boardroom. Fascinating article on this topic, which unpacks this in more detail. Bryce, that's available at Democracy Project NZ, I understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Just Google that.
Thank you
Yep.
very much for the work you do. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.